So you're using Wix to build your website and you want to incorporate a progress bar, a UI, which will indicate to users how they're progressing in a certain task, for example, filling out a form. This can really improve the user experience by making them not give up midway by understanding how much more they have to proceed in order to complete a certain task or action. Welcome back to the Wix Wiz. I'm Aton, and today we're going to be talking about how to implement a progress bar in Wix. We are going to show some very simple demonstrations, how to implement the very basics of the Velo code that's needed in order to control the progress bar's progress, and then we'll show a slightly more advanced implementation using Wix Forms. If you don't want to miss all that and more, let's get started. For today's tutorial, I'm starting off with a blank Wix Studio website, but everything I'm going to be showing you today can also be done inside of the Wix Classic editor. So let's start off with getting a basic understanding of how the progress bar works and how we can edit its properties using a little bit of Velo code. So to start off, we're going to add in the progress bar element. So let me go over here to add elements. And if you're not sure where it is, like me, you can just go ahead and use this search bar right up here and search, let's say, for progress. And hopefully that should be able to find that progress bar right over here. And once we give it a click, it'll give us a choice of the different progress bars. Sometimes it doesn't go exactly to the spot where the progress bars are, but it'll give you the general area, and then you can just go down over here to display and hopefully find those progress bars. And we can just choose one of the designs over here. So let's go ahead and choose this kind of black and white one. I think that one has like a good visual that's really clear. And I'm going to go ahead and make it really nice and big so that you can see it on your screen. So this is the progress bar right over here. And it has some settings that we can set here through the settings panel, like the target value. But in order to actually edit the progress, so how much of that progress is filled up, we're going to have to use a little bit of Velo code. In order to do that, we're going to turn on code mode or dev mode inside of our editor. So here inside of Wix Studio, that's going to be right over here on the side. So you see this code button right over here, and then we can just click Start Coding. If you're in the classic editor, then you're going to find a button kind of up here on the upper left that's going to say Dev Mode, and it'll do exactly the same thing. So now that we have this on, we have the code panel for this page open, the IDE, and this is where we're going to be writing our code right down over here. Before we start writing any code at all, let's go ahead and just select this element, so progress bar, and you can see that some additional information has been added here into the editor, so we can see in addition to just the type of element this is, we can also see kind of like an ID over here, progress bar 1, and that same ID is down here on the bottom right. And this is the name of this element that we're going to use to select it in our code. We'll talk about that in a moment, but first I want to check out this API reference over here. This API reference is the cookbook. It's the instructions for how to use this element in Velo code, all its different properties and methods that we can use. So you can see here on the left, this is the progress bar, and there's quite a lot going on here. We are going to focus on two main properties of this element. One is the target value. That's the total that this progress bar can get to, the max when it's full, when the progress is complete. That's the target value. And that's what we saw that we can kind of set with the settings in the no code editor in the panel, in the settings panel. And it's currently set to 100. And using the target value property in Velo, we can either get or set this target value. So if you wanted to set this target value dynamically versus the settings panel, you could also do that. The main thing that we're going to look at is this value property, and that's the current status of the progress. So, if something happens and you want to move the progress to, let's say we're talking about 100%. So if you want to move it to 10%, or you want to move it 20% or 50%, that is the value. It indicates how much of the progress has been complete. And that's what we're going to be playing around with a bunch inside of our code. So let's do a very basic demonstration. So if I head over here back into the editor, I'm going to go ahead and first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the name here. Instead of being progress bar 1, I'm just going to call it progress bar like that because I only have one progress bar here and it's super clear to me what it is. I recommend that you give an ID that will really help you recognize this progress bar in your code. So if you have multiple progress bars or you want to clarify what this progress bar is measuring, then you can add all that information into the ID. For me, progress bar is just enough. And let's go ahead and do two things. So first of all, I'm going to get the target value in order to see what it is. And I'm also going to set the value. So if we go over here into our onReady, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all this grayed out code. This is called commented out code. And it means that we're not really actually running that code. It's just to leave notes and stuff like that. So we don't need that. And all the code that we're going to write is going to be here inside of this onReady function. So the first thing I said we want to do is to get the target value. So let's go ahead here and create a new variable. And I'll call this progress bar target value. Okay, a really nice clear name there. And I'm going to say that that equals to the target bar. So this is how we select an element in Velo code, not the vector image, but the progress bar, just like that. And I'm going to do dot target value. Then after this, I'm going to add something called a console log. This is going to leave a little message inside of our developer console with information that we want to kind of take a peek into as our code is running. So this is going to be our target value. And I'm just going to put our progress bar target value variable there. So we'll get a peek into what our target value actually is, just like that. The next thing we want to do is we want to set a value for the progress bar. At the moment, it's not very dynamic. It's just going to be a static value. We're going to look in a moment how to kind of take this one level further. But for now, let's just practice setting a very basic value. So let's just say I want to set 70%. Since our target value, as we saw, is 100, so I'm going to set the value to be 70. So I'm going to, again, select our progress bar. And I'm going to say dot value equals to 70, just a number like that. And it doesn't need to be in quotation marks because it's a number. So only if we want to set a string or a text, then we put in quotation marks. For numbers, we just write it out as it is. So this all looks good. So what we can do now is we can go into preview mode by clicking over here, this eyeball up here. If you want, you can also deploy a preview as test site. So it'll launch a seemingly published site that's really not available to everyone, but it's really only available to you if you want to test it out. For now, the editor should be sufficient for our purposes here. So I'm going to go here to preview in the editor. And now you can see here that as the preview loaded up, so our progress bar is currently here at about 70%. Okay. And you can see here that the target value is 100. Okay, here inside of the code. So that is a small exercise for how to see the target value and to set the value. And now we're going to step it up a little bit and make it a little more dynamic. To demonstrate how we can dynamically change the value of our progress bar, I'm going to add in two button elements to our editor. So let me go over here to add elements, and I'm going to go ahead and search here for button, just like we searched before. And hopefully it'll work a little better this time. There we go. Button. Okay, so I added in a button here to our canvas, and I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to duplicate that button. So I'm just going to go ahead, copy and paste, because we want two buttons. And essentially, what we're going to do is we're going to program one button to move the progress forward and one button to move the progress back. I know this probably isn't exactly what you're going to want on your site, but hopefully this should start to give you the tools to implement what you actually want. So I'm going to go ahead and change the text here of this button to say, let's say, next. And I'm going to change the text here of this button over here to say back. Okay, just to indicate the direction that the progress bar is going to go. Next, I'm going to go ahead and change those IDs over here. So for the back button, I'm going to call it the back button. And for the next button, I'm going to call it the next button. Very surprising. now that we've gone ahead and we've named our buttons, we're ready to write up some code. So what I'm going to do over here under the code that we already wrote, I'm going to go ahead and comment out the existing code. Okay, so it's still here for reference, but it's not actually running. And what we're going to do is we're going to set the event listeners for our buttons. Now, before I do this, I want to point out that you have a new AI assistant over here on the bottom right. And you can actually use this in order to program your buttons. Like most AI systems, it's not perfect, but let me go ahead and give you a demo of what this might look like. So we're going to choose an action, let's say on click. And you can see here that we're doing it for our next button. And here I want to describe what will happen. So let's say uh, when the button is clicked, the progress bar should progress by 10. Okay, so when the next button is clicked, it'll move forward 10. Let's see if the AI manages to figure this out. So I'm going to go ahead and generate the code, and it will probably take a moment until it writes something out. And let's see here. So once we click the next button, the progress bar is going to be this element over here, and the increment value is 10, and then it's going to calculate a new value and then set the progress bar value to that new value. Okay, so overall, it looks pretty good. I don't know why it's using here the math min. Maybe it explains it here on the bottom. Um, we use it to ensure the new value does not exceed the target value of the progress bar. So I think in general, the direction is correct here. It's probably a little different than how I would have handled it. So let's I'm going to hop in and try and do this myself. I'm not going to use what the AI here generated, but I just wanted to show you this tool because it could sometimes be helpful to at least get the juices flowing and show you a certain direction for how things can be coded if you're completely stuck and you're not sure how to continue. So let's go ahead and close this up. And you'll definitely see some similarities between what we're doing and what the code is showed in the AI. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to select, let's start off with our next button. And we're going to set up the on-click event listener. Basically, this is what's going to happen when when the button is clicked. Okay, so on click, and then here we have something called a callback function. And here we're going to write the code of what we want to happen when the button is clicked. So what we could do is, in the most simple way, we can select our progress bar. So let's select the progress bar. And we can say that the value equals to the progress bar dot value plus 10. Okay, so this is a very, very, very simple setup. And there are some issues here that we're going to deal with later on. But in the most basic way, this is the code that will help increment the value by 10. Generally, I would recommend defining this variable as a global variable. So here on top of our onReady, what we could do is we could say const increment, and we can say that that equals to 10. I probably misspelled increment here, but you'll have to forgive me. And then over here, we can just say, instead of 10, we can say increment, just like that. Okay, so this will indicate to us that we're adding this specific increment, whatever it might be. And here we define it as 10. And this will make it a lot easier for us to change the increment later on without having to go and change our code in a lot of different places. Because if we just use this variable, then we can just change it once, and then all the places that we want to increment will change. So for example, if I change my mind and I decide, okay, instead of incrementing 10 now, we're going to increment 15. All I need to do is go right over here and change this to 15. Great. So now that we set up that basic usage, let's go ahead into preview mode to see what this looks like. So I'm going to go right over here and I'm going to click this preview button. And at the moment, we don't see anything over here. But if I go ahead and I click next, then you can see that slowly the progress bar starts to progress until we get to the very end. Okay, and once we're at the end, once I click next, nothing can really happen. But let's go ahead and go over here to edit our site and program our back button. So let me go over here, and our back button is actually going to be very, very similar. So I'm going to copy what we did for our next button, and I'm going to paste it right over here. I'm going to change it from next button to back button. And really the only change that we want to make over here is that instead of adding our increment, we are going to subtract our increment, right? Because we're taking off 10. So let me go over here and to preview mode now. And let's test out our next and back button. So I'm going to go over here, click next. Awesome. And I'm going to click back. And that seems to be working. Okay. So this is a super, super simple setup. And let me talk about some things that we're doing here that you might want to do a little differently in your own setup. So one thing that we're doing is that we're using the progress bar itself as the source of knowledge for how much we've progressed. So when we're setting the value of the progress bar, we're basing it on the previous value of the progress bar. Another approach that you might want to make is to declare a global variable of progress. Let's say start it off at 0, and then change that variable and assign that variable to the progress bar, just so that you have a variable that controls the progress, and that might be better if you are using this progress in different places inside of your application, etc. So that's one thing that we might have wanted to do a little differently. Another thing that we're not really doing here is we're not really controlling for the scenario where we've reached the maximum or the minimum of the progress, like we saw in that AI kind of AI generated code. So they accounted for a scenario where clicking next, for example, would bring you to 110 versus 100. And how you deal with that scenario is really up to you. As you saw here in the demonstration, nothing really broke when we tried to go forward. We just couldn't go more forward than the max, and we couldn't go more back than the minimum. If you want, you can also decide to display something to the user, or something might happen when you reach the maximum progress. So you can really just go ahead and, for example, here inside of the next button, you could go ahead and say if progress bar dot value equals to progress bar dot target value. Okay, so if the current value equals to the target value, then do something special over here, and then else just increment by the certain amount. Okay, so it's kind of pseudocode over here. I didn't write out completely what is going to happen here when we have reached the maximum. So what to do when max reached. So maybe you navigate to a different page, maybe you display some message to the user, whatever you might want to do. But this is how you can kind of figure out if you've reached the end of the progress bar. And you could do something similar for the beginning of the progress bar, but usually people are moving forward and not backwards. So it's more likely that you'll need something at the end than at the beginning. That is a very simple implementation. Again, I just put in 2 buttons, so you can really do whatever you want. I mean, just whatever you want to happen here when the next button is clicked, or whatever it is that you want to cause the progress bar to move forward, you would basically just need to incorporate code like this in that specific place. So now that we understand that building block for how to manipulate the progress bar, let's try and see a slightly more advanced and practical use case. In this final part of the demonstration, I'm going to be showing you how to combine a progress bar with a Wix form. This is a no-code form, but you can also do something like this as a custom form using a multi-state box. I have another tutorial on how to build something like that, but for now I'm going to show you how to implement this with a basic no-code form. So I'm going to go over here and add in a form. And I'm going to add in the new forms. You should be able to do this with the old forms as well. But I'm just going to go ahead and add in a new form over here. And when we add in new forms, it's a little different than the old forms. I also have a video about comparing the new forms to the old forms. And here we have this kind of form editor that opens up in the dashboard that we can use. And one thing that we can do here when we're using forms is that we can add multiple pages to our forms. Okay, right over here, we can add multiple pages. So let me go ahead and I'm going to add in, let's say, 5 pages to this form. And on each one of these pages, I'm just going to add like some fields. It's actually not really so important what the fields are. Let's just go ahead and drop in some fields over here. This is not how I would recommend designing a form, but let's just pretend that this is how we design the form. So there's essentially one page or one stage for each one of our inputs. So first it'll ask for the first name and then last name and then email and then phone and then birthday all on separate pages. And our goal will be to indicate to the user what stage of the form they're in. So like how much longer they have until they complete the form. Really improves user experience because then user experience because otherwise they're like, okay, how much longer is this form? And they might get tired and leave your form. So let's go ahead and click save. And hopefully that will add that form over here to our site. Let's go ahead. I'm going to close this dashboard now over here. And here we have our new form. Okay, so you can see here at the moment it's called Form 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just drag our progress bar from before. And I'm going to put it here right on top of the form. So this progress bar will indicate to us how much we've actually progressed in completion of the form. So in order to do that, we're going to have to tap into some of the Forms Velo APIs. So let's go ahead and click on this form right over here. And here we have the option also to navigate to the different form APIs. The form APIs are a little hard to navigate because there are a lot of different APIs for the old forms, the new forms, the form elements, the form, the how the form works inside of the element. There's a lot of different things going on, so it might get a little confusing, but hopefully I'll be able to point you in the right direction. So if you click here for the API reference for the forms, let's just go ahead and see where that takes us over here. So it takes us to Wix Forms v2. And if we take over here, if we take a look over here, so we can see a bunch of different APIs. And one of the methods is, so we have here, for example, get field values, get step count, get step number. And here's the one that I really want to deal with here, and that's on step number change. So I'm pretty sure, it's a little hard to tell exactly from the language because it's called steps here and pages inside of the form editor. But I think that this is the API that will help us, or at least the method that will help us identify when somebody moves between two pages on the form. So when somebody moves between steps on the form or pages, then this function will run, and essentially it will give us the current step number, which we can then use in order to program our progress bar and indicate to the user where inside the form they are. So let's head back to the editor and start to implement this. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and change the ID over here of my form. So instead of calling it form 1, let's call it progress form. Okay, because this is a form that shows progress. Obviously, you can call it whatever your form is. I just don't like to leave it as the plain form 1 ID that comes by default. So that's that. And now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to tap into that method when the step changes. So let's go ahead here. I've commented out all of the previous code that we wrote in the previous stages. So let's just go right over here up on top inside of the onReady. And I'm going to select our progress form. And I'm going to say that on. And let's go ahead and look for this on step number change. And here we're going to have the current step number. You can actually just call this variable whatever you want, but current step number. And then we're going to want to somehow translate that into our progress bar. So our progress bar is currently set to a target value of 100, which might not be appropriate if we have only 5 steps inside of our form. So as an initial step, what we might want to do is before we even run this, before we even program our form to move the progress bar, what we might want to do is select our progress bar and set the target value to be equal to, let's say, 5. If we want to be even more smart, if we want to be even more efficient, what we could do is we can see if there is a way to identify how many steps there are in a form. So for example, if we go back over here to the documentation, then here we can see get step count, okay, for our form. So instead of setting it to just a plain old number 5, what we can actually do is we can select our form. So form, progress form, dot get step count. So now no matter how many steps our form has, we will be able to automatically set the target value without having to make any changes to our code. So let's say we decide later on to add another page or another step to our form. This will all still work exactly the same. We won't need to make any changes because this is dynamically being set by the amount of steps inside of the form. And now what we can do here is we can just set the current value of our progress bar to be the current step number. Because the total value is the total amount of steps, then this should reflect the progress also from a percentage perspective and should really reflect the progress that the person is making in the form. So let's go ahead and select our progress bar over here. And we'll say dot value should be equal to the current step number. There we go. Pretty simple. So let's go ahead and try it out. So I'm going to go over here. And before we try it out, I'm just going to add one little console log over here. So I'm going to, right over here, add in a log, console.log. And I'm going to say current step number. And here I'm just going to have the current step number. And the reason I'm doing this is that just in case things don't work as expected, having insight into what the current step number is might be able to help us debug in the future, again, if we run into any issues. So I'm going to go ahead now and head into preview mode. And let's just wait for this all to load up. There we go. Okay, so I think that we're good. And I'm going to start to fill out our form. So let me just put in here first name, Aton, and click next. And we can see here that the progress bar has moved. To me, it looks like it moved quite a bit. So it seems to me like it might have moved 2 forward. So if I go ahead and I take a look over here, I can see here that it says current step equals to 2. So what it did is it essentially jumped from 0 to 2. And we'll discuss in a moment different ways that we could probably fix this up. It's a small fix, but this is part of the reason that I wanted to put in that console log there because I had a feeling something like this might happen. Let's go ahead and add in the rest here. I'm just going to go and add in some mock data here, and we can see it's moving along. Current step number is 3. Let's just do test@gmail.com. Next. Phone number. Next. And here we could see that it already kind of shows that we're at the end, even though, so it's current step number 5. And even though we haven't really clicked submit on our form yet. So ideally, we would want to make some changes so that when we start off our form, when we fill out the first step, we don't jump from 0 to 2. That's one thing we want to deal with. And the other thing is that when we're on the last page of our form, we don't want to show the form as complete. We want to show it as like almost complete. And these are actually 2 related issues that I think we can solve with one pretty simple change. And that is that instead of setting the value to the current step, we can set it to one step prior. Okay, so like when we're inside of step 1, you will see no progress. And when we get to page number 5 or step number 5, it'll show 4 instead of 5. Again, this is one approach. You might do some other kind of tweaking, but let me show you how that might look. So if we go here to edit site and we go right over here. So instead of setting the value to be the current step number, we can go ahead and set this to be current step number minus 1, just like that. And I think that that should do the trick. So let's go ahead and go into preview mode right over here. And let's just wait for that to start up. I think we're good. Let me try now, test, and I'm going to click next. And now it progressed only 1. And if we go ahead and keep on progressing here, yeah, there's validation on that. So let's go ahead and next, and phone number. And we can see here now that we're in the last stage. So we haven't completed our form yet. Let's see what happens when we do complete the form. Oh, year, month, day. Let's go ahead and submit that. Needs a valid phone number. Let's see here. Okay, it seems to be, let's choose a country. Next. Okay, I wasn't expecting, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I should have just picked all text. Let's see. Okay. Anyway, I'm not gonna. I can't really figure out here what's gonna be a valid phone number now. Let me see. Let me pick United States. Bloopers. And I'll just pick here. Okay, that should be a legitimate. That's not my phone number, but that should be a legitimate U.S. phone number. And click submit. Okay, so here we finished the submission, but it doesn't. It did. The progress bar didn't go all the way until the end. So what you might want to do here is to add some additional functionality. So if we go over here to the form APIs again, we can also tap into other APIs like onSubmit. And then we can set up so that once you submit the form, then you will go to step number 5, let's say, or the final step, or something along those lines. I'm not going to implement it right now because I think I gave you all the tools that you need in order to do that. If you are feeling stuck or anything like that, you can always reach out in the comments below. That's all for today. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned a lot about progress bars. The code from this tutorial will be available on the WixWiz website if you want to go check it out there. And if you felt that you didn't really understand anything, or if you have any suggestions for future videos, you can go ahead and put those in the comments below. I read all the comments and I try to respond to most of them. If you like the video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It really lets me know that this is the kind of content that you want to be seeing so I can make more of it. And of course, if you don't want to miss out on future videos, you can go ahead and subscribe to the channel, turn on whatever notification button or whatever so you don't miss next week's video and the week after that, etc. And I will see you next time.